Hi, I'm Maura Kolb. I'm the Director of Exploration from Treasury Metals. Our project is located in Dryden, Ontario. We are working to get to a construction decision by the end of 2023. But my team is really focused on growing the project. We have a 65-kilometer strike length here, 330 square kilometers, very little exploration ever on it. So the growth potential here is huge. So as we work on bringing this project to a production decision, the team here on site is focused on growing the project. So kind of two parallel streams to see, if we can make a new gold camp here in Dryden.
Maura, thank you so much for the introduction. Nice to see you again. The last time we spoke was back in April, and you had just published the resource update. And I'm just thinking the market hadn't really started to turn, had it? The gold price was still probably above $1,800 an ounce at that time, and it's now below $1,700 an ounce. And the market's had this huge shakeout. You got another kind of $20 million in the company, and you've had a really active program since that time. Now, I know you're in charge of the exploration, but just, I think, could you just give me a kind of a recap of the resource base as it is? And then we can kind of, I want to go in two different directions. One is to look at the work that you're going to be doing over the next year to get that resource closer to that final construction decision, and also the work along the camp. So could you give me a kind of a recap of the resource as it was when you published it in April earlier this year?
Certainly. Between measured, indicated, and inferred, we have 3 million ounces. We have about 1 million at Goliath and Goldlund that would be measured and indicated each. So that gives us a good base to start working on the reserves. And so in April, that's where we really kicked everything off to begin mine design planning and how we could put these two projects into production. Lots of work went on in terms of metallurgical. We did some geotechnical programs. So we were doing geotechnical drilling here on both Goliath and Goldlund. Man, it's been a busy year.
You've moved into the geotechnical drilling and the metallurgical test work since the resource update was done.
Yes, since the resource update was done, and amalgamating all of that into the pre-feasibility study, which we are, very close to finalizing now and putting out. As technical people, dotting I's, crossing T's, we would like to already have it out, but got to make sure it's good to go. So
okay, so the plan is to get the pre-feasibility study out now.
By the end of the year, yeah.
By the end of the year, and then when you talk about a construction decision in Q4 next year, does that mean the team's working for a feasibility study, or when you talk about construction decision, are you referring to something else?
We are working on a feasibility study. So we're kind of in parallel right now. We've kicked off the resource work for the feasibility study. Some of the things we wanted to add into the feasibility study was this additional geotechnical work, the metallurgical work, and then we have silver and gold at Goliath, but we never tested for silver at Goldlund. So we sent about 30,000 samples from Goldlund to the lab over this year, and we've just been including that into the resource. So the team here is working on tiny tweaks to the wireframes and making sure all of the new data that's been coming in is integrated into those resource models so that we can run them again and begin the feasibility study kind of in parallel.
A pre-feasibility study normally is the time when you do your trade-off studies, when you kind of optimize the size of the plant, or you decide that you make the decision, this is the size of the plant that we're going to run with, this is the throughput that we're going to work with, this is the mining schedule, and you also typically settle on the resource that you're going to be working with. Is that the case? I mean, are you comfortable that the resource that you updated in April may have a little bit of incorporated kind of tweaks kind of around the edges to it, but is that essentially is that the resource which is going to be studied in the feasibility study, or are there changes? Significant changes going to be made?
No, Merlin, no significant changes. That's really the resource that we have going into the feasibility study, with the addition of silver at Goldlund. We didn't do any additional drilling since the beginning of 2021 for the resource. So we had a few outstanding holes, I believe it's 30 in total, but they will just change they'll just infill. They're not going to make any significant changes. So we won't see it, any surprises in terms of that.
Okay, so the envelope is roughly going to stay the same. I was just having a look in your presentation, and you've got some kind of pit shells in there, and you've got some underground plans. Presumably, the feasibility study is going to be based on this, the open pits, one at Goliath and one at Goldlund. Is that maybe even one at Miller as well, possibly? So
yes, there'll be 3 open pits: one at Goliath, one Goldlund, and one at Miller. There'll be underground workings as well for Goliath. We do have high-grade chutes there that support underground mining as well. So the details will come out in the study shortly, but it'll be a mix of those different feeds. And then the mill is here at Goliath. And you've got
the underground drilled out enough to be able to incorporate that into the feasibility study.
Yes, we have it drilled off really quite well, and that was a big focus for us on Goliath last year, was infilling kind of the edges and making sure we really had the high grade chutes defined enough, and no big opportunities to add.
And there's always that trimming of once you've got your kind of inferred resource, or your measured, indicated, and inferred resource, there's always that what fits into a mine plan, what fits into an open pit, and then what kind of fits into a proposed underground development. When I had a quick look at Goliath, it seemed as if you got about 800,000 ounces, which kind of falls in the pit, which is presumably the first, 5 to 10 years of production.
We'll actually tighten up the pit to really focus more on the higher grade material within it, and then go underground from there. I think the ore body leans itself nicely to underground development. It's quite steeply dipping. It's pretty continuous, and visually you can see where it is. You go from a halo alteration into a very defined sulfide mineralization. So, I think it'll be quite nice for underground mining. Having done it in the past, I think this one will be pretty easy to follow.
And since we're on that, just a brief description of the geology. It's mostly quartz veining, isn't it? And it's kind of associated with shearing and pyrite.
So Goldlund is related to quartz veining. So it's on the edge of a granite intrusion and mafic to intermediate volcanics. And we have competency contrast there, creating big openings, 3 different vein sets, but they're really well concentrated along that contact. So we get a high grade zone that we can wireframe and really follow, and then more diffuse zones outside of that, and you'll see those in the open pit. So there's additional zones that have pyrite in the wall rock and stockwork veining. So that's Goldlund. And then at Goliath, we're in a kind of a failed VMS system where really the mineralization is defined by intense sulfides. So you'll see sphalerite, galena, and pyrite, and that's where you have the mineralization. The abundance of that really indicates to us whether we're in a higher grade or area. That's surrounded by intense sericite and silicification alteration. We kind of joke at site at Goliath, the rock kind of looks like zebra stripes. So we have biotite and sericite alteration, but you're in the zone when you're in that sericite alteration zone.
At Goldlund?
At Goliath.
At Goliath. Do they behave differently metallurgically? Are you going to, how do you tackle those different kind of mineralogies?
Well, they both have, they're fairly easy to mine. We'll be doing gravity CIL for both. And we have, potentially acid generating at Goliath and non-acid generating at Goldlund. So there's some opportunities too for blending that ore. In terms of mineralogy, they both have pyrite, but yes, definitely different accessories because they're formed in totally different systems. But so far they've been testing well together.
So just to recap, the process flow sheet is crush and grind, and there's a portion of the gold which is free, so that when once you've liberated the rock, it can separate nicely on with gravity. So that's the kind of the gravity portion of your flow sheet. You'll get a component of the gold which comes out under gravity, and then you're not doing flotation. You're just going straight into, or you are doing flotation.
There is a flotation portion, yes.
So you'll get a sulfide con that comes out, and then that goes into a carbon leach process.
Exactly.
Do you get kind of similar recoveries from Goliath and Goldlund?
Yes, some other hard questions. Slightly different, but I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Sorry, I'm taking you down a metallurgical route when.
That's okay. I just should have brought my sidekick, our project director. He'd have the answers like that.
Not at all. Interesting. And so the work that you're doing at the moment, you said you were doing some geotech work, but also doing some metallurgical test work. Are you drilling kind of PQ holes, or are you taking bulk samples? How are you getting the representative samples that you're going to be doing the metallurgical test work on?
That was a lot earlier in the year, but kind of around the same time as we put out the resource. So we were doing some deeper holes for underground, kind of how long we can make our stope strike length, to kind of understand that. And just wrapped up. Had the rock engineers here finishing logging that. And then the metallurgical testing has kind of been ongoing just to see if we can improve the recoveries and understand how they will blend. So that's all been wrapped up into the PFS. And I believe there's additional stuff going into the FS for outstanding questions, but that'll all come out soon. So don't want to spill the beans.
No. And presumably once the PFS is out, then you're going to have to, as part of the feasibility study, you're going to have to go in and do more infill drilling and really kind of de-risk the kind of the mine schedule and kind of get as much of this into reserve category as possible. We've
been around for quite a while and done some of this work in the past with the Goldlund being part of Tamaka and then First Mining, and we owning Goliath ourselves for a long time. So there's not a lot more to do on those fronts. There'll be some around, where we're putting the buildings and kind of making sure that that side of the engineering is good to go. But things are very, very far advanced. So it's kind of been doing our work early that would go into the feasibility study, and that's all kind of guns are blazing on that front.
I see you've got I can't remember where I read it, but you've got kind of 540,000 meters of drilling already on the project, which is a fair few drill holes. You must have a pretty big core shed.
Yeah, it's kind of the most amazing place I've seen in terms of the storage. So when we wanted to go back and sample that silver, all of the pulps and rejects were stored inside. We were able to use those rather than having to go out to core. But for any of the other test work we've done this year and last year, we were able to just go back to core. It's all stored really, really nicely. So kind of a blessing, not something you have everywhere. But all of that drilling was really focused on the two main deposits, the Goliath and Goldlund. So, that's where the huge opportunity to grow this and particularly find high grade, is lurking.
When you talk about high grade, what do you mean? Because there seems to be a relatively consistent grade here between 0.75 and 1.1 grams per ton, kind of across. Maybe some areas are, you've got some measured indicated at 1.3 grams a ton, but in that kind of 0.7 to 1.3 kind of band, that's where most of the resources tend to lie. Well,
you know what? To be honest, I think the most exciting thing here isn't the two deposit styles we've found. It's actually the Archean lode gold potential that's in the belt. Typically, when you're in a camp like this, you would find the Goldlund sort of material first because it's on these rocks that don't erode, so they stick out. They're easy to find by prospectors. But, if you look at, I'm going to use Red Lake because I was there for 8 years. They found those deposits first. Later, in further exploration, they found the really high-grade vein-style mineralization in your, greenstones. That's what got me excited. That's actually why I moved from Red Lake here, was the opportunity to go find the big one, the high grade. So what we're just really searching for with this year's program is more like 10-gram material, because that would give us a step change. We have two deposits that are well-defined at basically a gram. And that's interesting, but it should be a whole lot better if we also had some 10-gram material around to sweeten the deal. So, that's my team's entire focus, is where would we have high grade on this property? And like when I joined last year, that was our main focus, was to say, okay, I pulled an entire geologist away and myself, and we said, okay, let's think about generative exploration on where we would have this, because it only helps our story if we can bring in the elephant that should be here, to have VMS system, to have that kind of first find of an Archean system and have some base metal showings on the property. It tells me that we have a pretty fruitful system. So the sooner we can find that elephant, I think the better off the company will be. And it kind of brings us into that potential for a gold camp here in the Dryden area.
I remember very clearly from the first interview loving the exploration potential. I always struggle with kind of relatively low grade material. You know, it has to be exceptional. You need to have exceptional metallurgy and exceptional infrastructure for kind of 1 gram material to really work as a project. So absolutely, the opportunity to sweeten the operation with let's call it some 10 gram material, or kind of a meaningful lump of that would be great. So could you you said you've got some maps to hand.
Okay. Let me figure which one. I'm going to show you the Goliath property first. Yeah, so this is the Goliath property. So I'm actually sitting up here at the office. You kind of mentioned before with 1 gram material, you really need great infrastructure. Well, let me just remind everyone where we are. The Trans-Canada Highway is right here. All the mining equipment for every other project drives past our site. We have rail right here. The power line goes right through our property, almost next to where the future mill will be. So like in terms of infrastructure, we're kind of lucky that way. The Goliath deposit's here in that VMS system. To me, I thought, okay, where would we have an Archean high-grade deposit? Well, you know, you look for folds, you look for unconformities, you look for competency contrast, you look for fault splaying. So we started looking at that. And some of the best hits on the property historically, they did some exploration back in 2012 with Treasury. And some of the best hits on the property were in the fold nose. Hits like 17.5 grams over 1.5 meters. Last year, we drilled 10 grams over 10 meters in the fold nose when we did our first kind of initial exploration, kind of truthing of this target. And from there, we've spent a lot of time going back, relogging all the core that was available, trying to understand the different styles of mineralization that were there, and looking for how to interpret this and what orientation the high grade shoots will be at. Because in a fold, you typically have not a big continuous ore body, but something that's high grade and typically plunging. So we did quite a bit of homework on that, and I'll tell you a little bit more, but let me talk about the other targets that are on the Goliath property. Fold nose that I mentioned is a few kilometers away from where the future mill will be, so very close. And if we can find that 10 gram material up here, it's a quick drive on existing roads over to where the mill will be, which is right here at the tip of where Goliath is. We did some initial test working on these other targets, South Ridge, just prospecting, South Syncline, Gossan. Far East had been drilled in 2012 as well with 4 drill holes. The last one just clipped the Goliath host rock. It has quite a bit of cover over there, so there's quite a bit of glacial till. So, you know, you can't find it prospecting. However, we went back in last year, started drilling that in the winter, followed up into early part of this year as well. And we ended up clipping something pretty interesting. We have about 600 meters strike length defined so far, and it looks just like Goliath. So it's the same alteration, it's the same mineralization that we talked about just a few minutes ago. And then we also had 0.3 meters at 500 grams per ton. So potential for a high grade shoot. I don't know if we chatted about this, Merlin, but Goliath does have high grade shoots within it, but it's in a big low grade overall envelope. So, you know, doing exploration now on a similar target, we're going to go after the high grade shoots and kind of not define the entire halo, because that's not really what we're after. We want to define those high grade shoots. Sorry?
But you can use the halo as a vector to bring you in. If you clip the halo, if you clip the alteration, you can say, right, we're in the zone now. Now let's vector in on the high grade portions of it.
Exactly.
When you were describing the kind of the quartz veining and the company contrast for Goliath in that kind of earlier, that indicated that there were high grade shoots. And if you could get those to stack up, or kind of if you can build continuity on those, that can add ounces.
Absolutely. And at Fold Nose, we believe we have about 4 of these high grade shoots that we are targeting. One of which we have 2 hits in already. Now, we did a bunch of work over the summer, kind of boring, interpretive, boots on the ground, the stuff geologists love, but maybe not everybody else finds exciting. And now we actually just ramped up drilling again, and we've the core came in this morning, so I haven't seen it yet, but we were following up on one of those shoots that we have 2 hits in. So we think we have the orientation pegged. This overall folding system, the Goliath high-grade shoots are the same orientation as the fold axis. So our hypothesis that we're testing now is that high-grade shoot orientation may replicate across the entire property. And again, I'm going to use Red Lake as an example, but I've seen this in Red Lake. If you see the high-grade zone there, all the other high-grade zones that were in Campbell Mine as well have that orientation. If you look at the H.G. Young deposit, same orientation. So you're looking at about 10 kilometers where that high-grade plunge, continues. So we're using that same sort of hypothesis here because we've seen that lineation, that plunge throughout the entire property, and it seems to hold true so far. So that's what we'll be testing at the fold nose, and at the far east where we clipped the high grade, what we believe the high grade shoot is, we'll be following up on that as well in our next drill program. I mentioned before that area is a bit wetter, so we have to wait. It has a lot of till. We have to wait until we get colder ground, frozen, which won't be long, and then we'll be drilling that target as well. It's my favorite target, and definitely like our CEO Jeremy, this is his very favorite target. It's Interlakes. So we were just looking down here at Goliath part of the property, and then the rest of our 65-kilometer strike length. We're looking here in this red box here. Most of Goldlund is kind of train track stratigraphy, very straight up and down. We have those intrusions, like I mentioned before, that we have the gold mineralization on the contact of. What's kind of most exciting about this Interlakes area is that stratigraphy then sits between 2 plutons. You can see them nicely in the geophysics. It gets very tightly folded and complicated. And gold seems to love these areas where you have complications, more folding and faulting. It makes for good traps for high grade. And again, we really do want to sweeten the pot here. So we're looking for high grade potential to add to our mine plan. So what we've done, we have a bunch of geophysical data here. We prospected all last year and into this year on this one. And we've worked with Maura Geoscience to do a 3D inversion of that data, create a geologic model, and then use that to do prospectivity on where the targets will be. Mercedes on the team right now is planning the drill holes that we want to drill in this target area. We're getting the team to create a trail. I think the only reason this hasn't been drilled in the past by First Mining or Tamaka was just because it's a little bit harder to get to. So the existing road is here, about a kilometer away from the 72 highway that goes all the way up our property to the northeast, but no existing trails. We're quite spoiled here. We have all this logging in the area, so we tend to go and drill targets that are, literally right off the road. So I think that's the only reason this one hasn't been tested, because it's kind of a geologist's dream.
Hang on, just can I ask a couple of questions about that image? So the light blue colors, is that water, and are those lakes preferentially formed on erosional features, which are the intrusions? Yes,
they seem to be going right over top of the intrusions, and then this tight folding area is actually a bit of a ridge. I
can see the intrusion on the south or the western side, which is that lovely circular feature with what looks like kind of a slight magnetic you can see the circular feature very clearly. I can't see the intrusion, the second intrusion that you're talking about.
It's right through here. This green as well, it kind of takes some of this lake, and then the other portion of the lake does go over top of our fold here.
Okay, gotcha. And so the other up there. The other thing I can see, I don't know whether it's a feature of the data or whether it's actually a geological feature, but I can see in the middle of your red box on the main image a kind of very strong vertical kind of north-south.
Kind of north-south structure. Yeah,
yes.
There's something really interesting going on there. It was kind of the first thing that Maura brought up to us, and we said, yeah, we don't understand why exactly, but there's this very strong north-south feature. It seems to be a big fault structure. It's kind of probably our deepest seated structure from doing the 3D inversion. But then there's other intersecting faults as well that go along that. So that's definitely getting a few drill holes to target that, because we think that could be a real source for fluids coming through the area.
And the ridge you talked about, is that just to the east of that?
It's actually where these lows are. There's little ridges along them, so kind of interesting.
Silicious features.
Silicious features, yeah. So we're going to be testing the competency contrast through here, as well as the fault structures for bringing in fluids. So we just went through this a couple of days ago. I think we've got about 8 or so holes planned right now, and the team's kind of going back and forth on where we like these the best. And we've worked. Do I have the next slide? Yeah. Kind of some of the work with Maura of going through the model that was created using all of the products that come from doing a 3D inversion, which is using all of your different geophysical data and creating this model, and then honing in on the structures. So
look at that structure. I mean, they're just classic rotated blasts, really, aren't they? Kind of
exactly.
I can see I can see the second intrusion beautifully there. That's interesting, and that north-south feature comes up the eastern side of that. It's almost of that the smaller intrusion, and you could almost kind of put on a kind of a Riedel kind of system onto that ductile. Yeah,
exactly.
Into the realms of geofantasy, I fall.
It's a fun place to be.
Yeah.
So,
have you got kind of ground truthing support for this in addition to the silicious prominent ridges? Have you got geochemistry? Have you got rock samples that kind of give an indication that you're into a preferentially enriched area?
So yes, we kind of honed in on this last summer, and we spent the last half of the field season out there combing the forest. We did find some mineralized samples, some previous trenching, and I didn't mention yet, but there are some historic drill holes on these mag highs. We're actually at a terrain kind of a boundary here, so we're at an unconformity, and along these mag highs, there was some historic drilling, only 30-meter depth holes, 14 gram over a meter hosted within them. So definitely some juice in the area, some trenches there that have sulfide mineralization. So yes, we've seen some of the ground truthing. Some of the areas have more cover than others. One of the things with Goldlund is we have the intrusions that kind of stick out, but then the mafic rocks have more weathering over top of them. So
thank you very much. You've also got, we've just been talking about the Interlakes area, but you've got tens of kilometers to the northeast. How are you exploring that portion?
So we've last year we did this big targeting exercise, thinking of, where are any potential targets that would host gold or base metals or the VMS kind of gold system. And then we decided to rank them all. So you have to be pretty strategic about what you're looking for and think of how you want to do your ranking scheme. So for us, we said, okay, what's the size of the prize? What are the geologic features? How good do they look? And then what will be the timeline to get this into production? Logistics, because, we're in Northwestern Ontario. We don't want to drill on top of lakes. It can be challenging in swampy areas, all of that. But our logistics here are pretty excellent in terms of the roads and trails we have. So we're lucky that way. And then risk, geologic risk, social risk, environmental risk. And that's how we've ranked them. So we kind of set up a matrix, ranked all those targets, and the cream kind of easily floats to the top there. So the targets that we're going after that have made them at highest priority, Gold Nose, Far East, this Interlakes area, all because they have the potential for high grade or we understand them really well. So I think with the Far East, that looks just like Goliath. I actually brought core to meet the community the other week and confused which sample was which because they look exactly the same. So we think we can use the knowledge we have on Goliath to bring that one into resource quickly. In fact, that's our goal, is to put out a resource on the Far East next year with the FS study to say, okay, look, we've only done generative exploration for a year-ish and we found something, we made a discovery, we brought it to resource.
But you're not yet. you're not yet at the kind of that point where you could say you're definitely going to get a resource at Far East. Well, not definitely a high grade one anyway. You might you may be comfortable that you can get a bulk mineable target or kind of a low grade resource, but you haven't kind of got the. And I'm always slightly cautious about this concept about making a discovery, because normally a discovery is only understood in retrospect, and so you can look back and say, oh, that was the hole where it all started hanging together. But it doesn't feel as if you've made a discovery yet at Far East, even though you've got lots and lots of good signals.
Yeah, well, we have drilled, I think it's 4,000 meters there on that target, to find 600 meters of strike length. The width of Goliath itself is 150 meters wide. We've seen that alteration halo through the drilling we have so far. So we kind of did a fence along and then across to see if we had the geometry. So now it'll really be a test this winter to see if it holds together. I think we've honed in on where the high grade shoot will be based on the geometries. And I think it's our best shot to have a resource. I would love to have one at Fold Nose, but we have a lot more geologic work to do. And that's what we spent the summer really focused on was, let's use the data we have. Let's not only use the drill bit, because there are lots of tools that are at fingertips as geologists, but we tend to often go to that drill bit first. It saves us a lot of money if we, use the geophysics, use the geochemistry, go out and map it. All that stuff saves you a lot of money. So we did that. We actually turned off the drills and said, we're just going to stop and think and spend the next 3 months doing that and getting boots on the ground. So I'd love to see that. But at this point, we have a kind of a dream there. So hopefully it'll come to fruition.
Have you got the assays back yet for that 4,000 meters of drilling at Far East?
Yes. So we press released that, I think, in June. I could show you all the results.
Sorry, I should have. I should be abreast of all your drilling results.
Well, it hasn't been an exciting time to put out results. So we also took the opportunity to stop drilling and think when no one really cared about drill results. So it's okay. It has been a tough market that way. So this is all the results for Far East. I mentioned when I got excited was when we hit this with the 500 grams over 3.3 meters. That doesn't stress me out that it's over such a small amount, because we see that in the Goliath deposit where, we'll get quartz veining when we have a really good intersection between in those chutes. And then the low grade halo will actually deplete and we'll get a really high grade sample like this. So to me, it says, oh, we have the potential for shoots here. We have 600 meters with that kind of geology that we see, the right mineralization. It looks the same. We've kind of defined the package. And then the first priority is to test around the high grade that we intersected and see if we can actually define a shoot. And then also see if the strike length continues. Goliath itself is 1.5 kilometer footprint. Yeah. So we've got about a third of that footprint defined here. Goliath's 1 million ounces. I'm hoping that we have the same kind of footprint here, but we'll be able to define that and specifically target the higher grade portion of this rather than the halo. Well,
congratulations. That's a great result to come up with in an early stage campaign. 9 meters at 17 grams or 0.3 at 500. It's a success.
It's the start of something for sure.
I learn by repetition. Can you repeat for me the kind of the work plan that you've got going forward now, both at the resource level on the existing within the known envelope of mineralization at Goliath and Goldlund and Miller, and also on the kind of regional exploration plays?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the resource. So the work is ongoing for the PFS resource, integrating the silver results that we got and the last couple of drill holes that weren't included in the PFS resource. Those will be brought in. That work has already begun. And then we'll go on with the additional studies, kind of any additional work that came out of the PFS that needs to be fine-tuned for a construction decision. And that will be wrapping up kind of late next year so that we can have a construction decision by the end of the year. On the geology front, we have done a bunch of homework, boots on the ground kind of work, mapping, prospecting, relogging core, looking at the regional stratigraphy, all of that to tie into our exploration targets. We've highlighted the top 3 being the fold nose for a high grade kind of shoot potential, the Far East to be another Goliath, and Interlakes to be another folded area where there could be high grade lode gold system. We have a plethora of other targets as well. So now we have a full resource pipeline. You always want to have targets that you're defining for resource, but then the next one's coming up so that you don't kind of run out of things to bring into your mine plan. And that's a very typical approach of a Barrick and a Newmont, and they use that same approach that we are.
Yeah.
We'll continue.
Sorry, Constantine, what's the work plan for Fold Nose, Far East, and Interlakes, those 3? So
for Fold Nose, we've begun drilling follow-up targets based on the work we did with Maura Geoscience, the mapping and field work that we did in relogging. So we're testing high-grade shoots. From the 3D inversion, we also defined different fault orientations, and we've been testing those. We'll just do a small program there, learn from those results, integrate them into the model, and then go back and see what should be tested, what shouldn't. So that's a few thousand. So that's a few thousand meters, and you're going to kind of do that in the next month or 2. Exactly. We've begun now. We have a handful of holes left. I think about 4 or 5 more to do there. We're prepping to go into the Far East. It's a more wet area, but unfortunately, we already saw some snow this morning, so we're getting colder. So we'll be ready to go back out into that area and begin drilling those targets, testing the strike length there to see if we have a footprint as big as Goliath, but hone in on the high grade shoots, define them as quickly as possible, and see if we have a core there that we want to go after. In conjunction with that, we've begun planning drill holes that we'd like to test on Interlakes based on the geophysical work, the prospecting and mapping that we did. And we're creating a trail. So there's never been any drilling up in that barely folded area. So creating a first trail to get in there and to be able to drill those drill targets. So that's kind of our work plan for now. And going into 2023, we plan to, based on the results from the first pass on Far East, we'd like to continue to drill at Far East and hope to have a resource on the Far East in the new year.
Good. Well, it looks as if you're going to need to get your winter clothes out and go and look at
sweater already.
Yeah. Fantastic. Every time I think about moving to Canada, I always think of the weather.
Well, go to Vancouver or something. It's not snowing there yet, but we are in the north, so yeah, it's all right.
It's all right. I remember the Vancouver friends of mine laughing when they came to the UK, and when we get a heavy bit of rain, what people do in the UK, for example, is they shelter under a tree or under a bit of a building because that rain will pass. And they say if you try that in Vancouver, you'll kind of die of starvation because you could be there kind of a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it rains quite a bit. Yeah. Those beautiful sunny days, it's great.
It is. What a wonderful place. Maura, thank you so much. It's really interesting seeing what your plans are. Good luck with the drill bit. Keep exploring and keep discovering stuff. And I look forward to seeing the PFS when it comes out, hopefully in a month or 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Merlin. It's been lovely chatting with you.